Welcome to the Hundredth Monkey Radio with Tom and LFE. We are making this video to let you guys know of some changes that we're making at the beginning of this year. We're kind of getting rid of our subscription system and, going to kind of an honor system as far as that energetic exchange that we need to happen with the show. I mean, the show's been paying for itself for the last 7 years, and through the subscription system. But I want to get this material out to more people. Yeah. I want more people to have access to that second hour, and not feel obligated to subscribe for a monthly subscription or whatever. I think it's a necessary part of this evolution that we're going through, that there's an energetic exchange of some kind.
Yeah.
And frankly, we need something to be able to keep the show going. I mean, it does cost some money. Yeah. I mean, it costs, several $1,000s to keep what we're doing going every year.
Yeah, not counting the time that we put in.
Yeah, not timing the time and effort and energy that we spend on a weekly basis bringing this stuff to you guys. So, there has to be some kind of energetic exchange. And we decided we're going to put it on this format because, number one, we want more people to have access to the second hour content. And, number two, I've got faith in my fellow man.
Yeah.
I know that our listeners out there are going to step up to the plate and cover our bases for us.
Yeah.
I mean, just take a look at our archives and all the different people that we've had through the last 7 years. I mean, we've had there's some amazing shows there. So if there's going to be a donate or a subscription tab that's with every one of these shows, and we expect everybody to do one of two things. They're either going to help us out financially, or they're going to pay it forward in some form or fashion. Yeah. And whether it's passing this stuff off to somebody else, or doing some, helping a lady across the street, whatever it happens to be. So the tabs, the subscription format's still going to be available if you want to make like a monthly donation. If you want to make something that's recurring, that's awesome. That helps us out tremendously. Or if you want to just make a one-time donation, that's always available too.
Yeah. And it's up to you how much you want to donate. I mean, if you could afford $1, $1 helps. If
exactly,
if 1,000 people donate $1, I mean, that'll get us a long ways, and not only in the show, but in the whole background of doing the show, with our computer work and the editing and the software and hardware we need, and the upgrades to the technology we need,
right,
to help the show along. $1's not too much, but I mean, even if it's not $1, just like Tom was saying, pay it forward, give it to somebody else, spread the information you learn, or share the shows on Facebook or something like that, let's get this information out there. And especially with the second hour, like, we really get into a lot of meat and potatoes with the second hour. I mean, the first hour is kind of, our warm-up hour, and the second hour is where we really get into it. So we really want that second hour to be out there for everybody to listen to and to absorb that information.
Yeah. We've got WordPress on the website, so what I think initially what we're going to do is we're going to stick up a comment section on the main page, a WordPress comment section, or at least a link to the WordPress comment section where people can go and drop their comments or suggestions or whatever. If you want somebody specific, us to get somebody specific on the show.
Yeah.
It's great for us to hear that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Or any comments or suggestions,
Yeah. Or if you check the website and you see an upcoming guest that we're going to have, feel free to email us specific questions you have for that guest, and we'll try to work them into the first or second hour. Or if you have ideas for guests that we should have on the show, email us that too.
Good stuff. We're going to also be adding in the info tab underneath this second hour that you're about to listen to. There's also a link there, direct email to the info@the100thmonkeyradio.com if you want to just drop us an email. So, all right, guys. Well, I want to thank everybody for all the years of support that they've given us, and To our current subscribers, the choice is yours on whether or not you leave your subscription as is and continue the recurring stuff, or whether you drop that. I mean, this is, it's all up to you guys. So we thank you for your continued support, and man, on with the show, right?
Yeah, on with the show.
All right, namaste, my friend.
Welcome back to the 100th Monkey Radio with Tom and Ella Fee. And tonight we have Rae Randall. And we want to thank everybody who is listening to the second hour. We really, really appreciate you coming over and, helping support the radio show and the information we're putting out there. And, we're just really grateful and, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Claire, this is kind of a broad question maybe. Before the show today, Tom and I were talking, and Tom went through his initial wake-up process, about 30 years ago. And, 30 years ago, you start asking yourself these questions upon consciousness. And, there's not all that many resources out there and guides out there to help you find these answers. As opposed to now, where we can hop on the internet and we can, really assist ourselves in this this waking up process. And in terms of the 100th monkey effect, and and the idea or the energy already being put out there into the ether, I'm kind of wondering that in our time frame right now, with this conscious awakening that's happening and these new energies that are coming in, and more and more people are awakening to this way of thinking. I'm wondering that if we didn't have the internet right now, we're getting a little feedback on your end.
Okay, just a minute. Shall I just turn the level down a bit? Does that help?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So now, let's say in this time that we're going through now, if we didn't have the internet to answer these questions that a lot of us are asking, would it be more of like the 100th monkey effect, because there's so many people asking these questions that we can just pull the answers from the ether instead of pulling the answers from the internet?
Oh, wow, that's very, well, obviously the internet has a lot to do with the dissemination of ideas, and discussion obviously is a very big part of it. But I think that the internet alone it's a wonderful thing, but if we don't really get into developing our real life paths, then this is kind of a lot of stuff that is like that, kind of out there in the ether. And sometimes I think there's almost too much, because obviously in the past people would follow spiritual pathways that are very limited choices. They'd follow those paths, for most of their life probably. Whereas now, certainly that the putting out of so much information that would never get out otherwise, obviously that's a fantastic and wonderful thing. But also, I'm sure you've come across this, there's also plenty of room for distraction, misleading. And I remember thinking, in the run-up to 2012, I remember thinking, what is it? What is the thing that we really need to get? What is the thing that we really need to get? What is that 100th monkey concept? And, well, certainly in terms of 2012, I think what has happened is that it's certainly what I thought at the time, which was we need to be able to discern deception. If we could discern deception, then that would be a really wonderful thing for people to get generally. So that we can separate the wheat from the chaff, as I said earlier.
Right.
Mm.
Well, if I think the point that LP was making, if let's take where so many people have developed themselves to now. Okay, there's a lot of depth of understanding of reality and the way things work now that's out there. I mean, a tremendous amount of people are coming online, so to say. Let's pull the internet completely out of the picture here now. And we have all this knowledge and this wisdom that has been developed within humanity. And let's say somebody else is coming online. Someone else is just now asking the real questions of themselves. Do you think that information now, since we have so many more people that have developed themselves in certain areas, that if somebody was wanting to understand a certain principle or a concept, that it would be easier to receive from themselves through inner work, through meditation, through channeling, or for whatever resource that they have? Do you think that information is easier to access?
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, well, I think probably would be the case, because that is the 100th monkey kind of concept, and it would go along with what I said earlier about having to put a bit of energy in yourself, to kind of prime it. You're not just going to, get some kind of cosmic awakening from just simply kind of thinking about it.
Right.
But, that certainly, I mean, if we think about quantum physics, particles change state when they have energy put into them. And this is very much the idea that I have. So there will be ambient energy around there. I think certainly people coming across some ideas these days, even though they haven't heard them before, they've only perhaps come across conventional, mainstream religious ideas. They might come across new ideas. And I think the general mindset helps. So even, if they're not getting into a particular frame of ideas, nonetheless, the whole, world mindset is more amenable to these things.
Yeah. Why do you think it is so many people take it takes so many people some form of trauma to get them to ask questions? I mean, I'm a prime example of this. I mean, I took the proverbial 2x4 upside the head. I mean, my house burnt to the ground, marriage was dead, and just so many bad things happened to me in a really short period of time that got me down on my knees and made me ask what the hell was going on. I mean, why do you think it is within humanity that it takes so many of us some traumatic event to get us to ask questions?
Well, I think that it's just a fact of biological existence that we all just want a quiet life. And I remember quite a few years ago having a kind of epiphany with regard to something a friend said about just wanted to be left alone. Why couldn't the world just be kind enough to leave them alone? And I had a deep reflect on this, and I thought, well, the thing is, the universe that's just the way the universe is. Or certainly our local version of it, whether there are, archons or whatever messing around with us, I don't know. But certainly the era that we're in, there is so much change happening. There's so many people got agendas, that it's, that a quiet life being left alone, is not an option. So we have to, so there's this kind of, I imagine there are millions of people at the moment who are in that kind of state, right, where they're just trying to remain asleep. I just want to be left alone. Just leave me alone, And then it kind of gets to a point where you say, okay, it's not going to leave me alone, whatever it is. Whether it's our own demons, or the corporate people trying to dispossess you, or whatever it is. And then you have to kind of turn around and start taking some kind of responsibility not for necessarily, the fact that that's where you have arrived. I mean, I do mean you have to take responsibility for where you are, but when you have woken up to things, it gives you a great deal more agency than before you did. And so, go on.
I wonder if it's a case of, is it the one bad apple spoils a whole bunch on a collective level? If we've got something wrong within the collective, okay, which boy, we can point all day long at things that are wrong within the collective as far as, the system that we have set up here on the planet. I mean, we can spend all day pointing at things like that. But do you think it's a case of the one bad apple spoils a whole bunch? If there's something wrong within the collective, then it's something that is kind of pointed out, or energy is drawn to self-correct.
Well, yeah, I think the local group has to, I guess, take some kind of attitude about it. I think this is what Carl Jung would say anyway, is that when you see conflict or something comes up, which is like this would be a part of the collective shadow, then you have to. It's like what I said earlier about decisions. You have to take an attitude to it. You have to decide what to do about it, because otherwise you just remain in the same position.
Right.
And nothing changes. So I think what Jung would say also is that casting light on the shadow, it's much easier to know what to do when you can see what the problem is.
True.
So that would be just a kind of general statement. I mean, it'd be hard to say what the exact bad apple was, but I think being aware of the differences, of some good behaviours are good and some are not, and performing with your own integrity, of course, gives you a basis.
And doing that, boy, gee, just doing that is a challenge right now in society.
Well,
people standing on their own integrity when society and their programming is contrary to the true human nature.
Yeah. On Facebook here in the last week or so, I got into a conversation with a friend of mine who lives in San Diego about the whole refugee process, right? What's going on with the refugees in the world. And the conversation between me and him was just fine, but some other people that he was friends with, was reading the conversation, and they definitely didn't like it. And I had never been like harassed online before. But in the last week, I've been called a socialist, a terrorist, so many different things by these people that, are just completely blind to the world around them and can't look any further than, CNN and Fox News. I had somebody called me a terrorist, told me to, double up on my tinfoil hat, And so, at first I was.
What do you think they actually meant by that?
I think that there's still a large portion of the people that are, that are bought in hook, line, and sinker to whatever, mainstream media says. And, they have no desire to, look outside. They have no desire to do any independent research. They want, a fast and easy answer that they can click on the TV, they can hear it, and they can turn it back off and go about their business.
Mm-hmm.
So I was getting to a point, and then it eludes me.
Sorry, carry on.
Yeah. So
He lost his point.
yeah.
You're saying about your friend in San Diego?
Yeah. Yeah, he, and the conversation that me and him had, we were along the same lines that, everybody needs help, and, everybody should stand up in their own sovereignty and, help themselves, without just expecting somebody to help them.
Mm-hmm.
And that from that conversation, other people started, saying, well, we can't let, basically screw the refugees. They should be on their own, and we shouldn't have to do anything about it. So it seems like there's just a lack of humanity. Like just because they come from a different country, they're still humans and they still need help. And I'm sure they've been trying to help themselves for a while now.
Well, this is a to get into the actual political situation. I mean, if you're talking about the European situation, are you talking about Syrian refugees going to America rather than the Mexican situation? Yeah. Well, the thing is, this is just such an incredibly complicated situation. I kind of almost don't know where to start on it, really. I think that it is a situation which has been provoked and created to a large degree, and there are multiple repercussions from it, and also I've seen some information that apparently it's something like 12 times more expensive to maintain a refugee in the States, or probably slightly less than that to do so in Europe, than it is to support people in the refugee camps in areas like Turkey, which would make it easier for them to get back after the trouble has hopefully abated down. So it's a terribly complicated situation. I'm kind of thinking that it's very much kind of being exploited to get people's guards down, because obviously there are genuine refugees there, but also a tremendous number of opportunists, really. The EU statistics themselves have said that I think it's about 20% from Syria, and the rest are not. So I think that the popular feeling about it would be a lot more positive if we saw a more concentrated group of women and children and old people, and clearly definably Syrian, So, and also there's the thing about the way that what is it now? It's the Dublin Agreement about refugees claiming asylum in the first safe country they get to, has been that. So that's technically they should have all claimed refugee asylum status in Greece, but Greece is in, I don't know if you know, but Greece is in a complete financial state. So they'd probably not get anything from Greece. So Germany and Sweden are the two favourites, because they offer the most generous benefits. So I think that the situation has got. This is what I mean when I say about discerning deception. I think the situation has been created to a large extent, and then exploited in its usage of trying to get mindsets onto people, which are based on being given false information, and what Angela Merkel has done is she's really been she's just kind of taken on too much. I think this is one of the really, really important things about how to progress forward in a world where hopefully you do what you can to make things better. I think that biting off more than you can chew because it makes you look good, it is kind of counterproductive, in the end. So,
Yeah.
It's a very unfortunate situation, but it's also, it's been, it does seem, I mean, I've seen evidence that, Soros has been trying to, promote this, with, information and, even finance to destabilize the European Union. So there's tremendous amount of, kind of, backstory going on here. And I think that there is a kind of battle going on in the morphic fields here between, those who are trying to see what's going on and those who are trying to promote a particular view of it. I think that one of the problems is that the media, I mean, I don't know if this is the kind of thing that you get when you see CNN. I mean, it may be with different views, but it's the same agenda, which is they promote a particular view, whatever that view might be. It might be pro, it might be anti, it might be whatever, but they make sure that no one questions it or has an alternative.
Yeah.
That's the main thing.
And it's interesting to me that, when we first started talking about this, you asked if I was speaking about the refugees from Syria or from Mexico.
Mm.
And, we've talked to, quite a few people over in Europe, and in Europe, they refer to, the Mexicans that are crossing over the border as refugees. Whereas in America, they're referred to as illegal aliens.
I can't remember which term I used. Did I say migrant or refugee? I can't remember.
You said refugee, but that kind of brings into the picture that and I already think this. These people from Mexico, they're fleeing horrible things that are happening down there, and they are refugees fleeing from a country that's killing them, from people that are killing them. But yet, the way it's broadcasted in America is that they're illegal aliens, and we need to do everything we can to stop them. I mean, you have civilians on the borders through Texas and New Mexico and Arizona that basically just go out there and on hunting parties, to kill these humans that are crossing this imaginary line in the dirt. Because on our media stations they're referred to as illegal aliens. I wonder what if this whole time if we had been calling them refugees instead of illegal aliens, if we'd still have that same mindset.
Well, I can't really claim to be fully informed about the Mexican situation, although I do hear it's a pretty major item in American politics at the moment. I mean, the way I look at this is, I had a kind of a moment last year. I mentioned that previously that I'd written a blog about a public inquiry we had in Leeds last year, and I actually had a kind of moment when I was there. Obviously, we were concerned about local transport and planning issues. This is what it was about. And then one of the city councillors got up and he was giving some evidence, and he mentioned the words 70,000 new dwellings in North Leeds. And I thought, what? Because that's about 175,000 people. And I thought Leeds is only about 650,000 city. So it's like a third or a quarter of the city. And so I sort of started thinking about this in terms of infrastructure, demographics and infrastructure, because that's the context in which I heard about this. So I think that what I would find myself being concerned about is, and this comes back to my point about Chancellor Merkel, is that you can, if you don't have the infrastructure and the resources, that you can kind of create overload and collapse problems, even though you might have the best of intentions. So I would be concerned about the practical, resource implications about this, really, I think.
Yeah, and that's something that I've kind of thought this whole time that all this has been going on, is that, it seems like it's been that it's a structure put in place to divide humanity on a whole nother level now. We have all these things that are put in place to keep us separate, to keep us from unifying. And this is just another thing that they're putting in there so we can have controversy, so we can have, on one side of the fence you have this enemy, and on the other side of the fence you have another enemy. But there's still, it seems more like a false construct, a false enemy that, there is no enemy. These things have all been put in place just to divide us, just to keep us off our paths, and to not be looking in the real directions, and to figure out what's actually going on.
Well, I think I'm going to have to take a different angle on this, I'm afraid, Tom, because I think that you can't be sure. I'm reminded of how when Rome fell, it was not because they had ceased to be the world's greatest military power or whatever, but because they kind of lost. When Alaric the Visigoth was standing at their gates, they said, "Oh, okay, well, all right," and then that was the end of the Roman Empire. Now, and perhaps if whoever the emperor at the time was had said, "No, I think we'll sit it out in here for a bit longer," perhaps Alaric would have gone away, and we'd still have the Roman Empire. I don't know, but I mean, I think as we've seen, there's still some speculation over this, but there does seem to be some indication that really it is the case that these Daesh, Islamic extremists, are infiltrating in amongst the migrants, the refugees, and so there needs to be. I do believe in a systems theory kind of view of this, in terms of organisms and cells have to be able to assimilate aliments, as they're called technically, and also at the same time resist and reject pathogens, viruses, harmful organisms and such like. So I think it's what I said earlier about the new ways of thinking coalescing. You have kind of communities, and then the communities will coalesce into larger communities. I think it's the same way with this, that you have to have cells which can exist autonomously on their own, and that the boundaries that have evolved over centuries, even millennia, are like these coalescing, communities of interest. And, Europe, the European Union, is an attempt at that. I've got my criticisms of that, but I think it's a good idea. I think they've just gone about it very badly.
Yeah.
Well, that's probably a bit of a sidetrack.
Yeah. Well.
Yeah. So I suppose, what I'm saying is it's discernment,
Right, right. Well, there is an element out there that is hell bent on keeping us distracted, so that we don't really get a clue on exactly what strings they're pulling and how they're steering humanity. And it seems like every time there's any sort of event, like the traumas that are going on over there in Syria and the refugee wave of people that are coming out of there, that anytime some kind of an event like that happens, there's an element that grabs onto the story and tries to steer it the best they can to tailor to their own agenda, whether it's related to it or not. They do everything they can to capitalize on something, and which diminishes the real event, diminishes the tragedy or the need for help that people are experiencing. Like, we've got all these people that are, this whole thing's coming out with people needing help. They need some help. And it's that fact has been so watered down and it's been politicized, and so are the people still getting the help, or has it just become a political card that people are playing to further their own personal agendas? So
well, forgive me if I take this off at a different angle, because the thought, something that I've been thinking about recently about this, is that I think that to a certain extent there's a kind of Pied Piper element here. Do you know what I mean? The old
right.
fairy tale about the Pied Piper of Hamelin, who came along and he led all the children away and they disappeared. And I've actually got a feeling that this is what is intended for places like Syria, because it's, neighbouring powers, shall we just say. Syria is it's a very prime bit of real estate. It's right at the centre of the Fertile Crescent. It's the crossroads of world history, pretty much.
Right.
And one thing I've just seen, that whenever I see obvious things not being mentioned in the media, I think that should be mentioned. And what it is that basically Syria is being depopulated. And one of the things that I think is very interesting about this is that it's quite clear that all these Syrians and the other 80% of Iraqis, Afghanis, and various African peoples finding their way in, really it's destroying Syria. It's weakening Syria because people who are the future of Syria are being persuaded that they could, it's kind of, temptation and cupidity, and they're sort of saying, oh God, it's a right mess here. Oh, I could always go, and then they don't think about the future of their own country. So that all the, all the young men who should be, defending Syria and caring about their future are all off somewhere else. And then they're probably, if they do get employment in Europe, then they'll be sending money back home, so that they'll be depleting the economies of Europe.
Right.
Not just because they might be taking a job from a European worker, but because they'll be sending, and this is such a big thing, that we've got a huge Pakistani population in this country, and I know that a lot of them send huge sums of money back, in aggregate, to their families and relatives back in Pakistan. So really, it's kind of what I'm concerned about is that even the people who are supposed to be getting some kind of benefit out of this are themselves tools who are that will not really gain any benefit out of this, because there's the sheer numbers of people who are obviously not Syrian are causing a lot of there's a lot going on under the surface in Europe at the moment, particularly in Germany. They're just being asked to do too much. You know, I've thought, because as I said at the beginning, I mean, I've sort of off and on through my life pretty much considered myself a Christian until quite recently. And one of the things is that I think that the Christian ethical values are absolutely brilliant in communities that all accept the values. And I think that is what, that's what it's designed for. You've got the early, Christian communities in the, first and second centuries. But the values of, the Good Samaritan, what have you, I think that they are values which can be exploited. And then the Good Samaritan is overwhelmed, because if the Good Samaritan, took the poor chap who had been, waylaid by robbers, and then took him, he took him to the inn and he paid for his care and he, made sure he was okay and everything, and that's really great. But what's the Good Samaritan going to think if then the next day the chap's 12 relatives come along and say, oh, can we,
have the same deal?
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of like, hey, hang on. That was a one-off particular for that occasion. And now it's being kind of taken as,
As a given,
an opportunity. Yeah. So, I know this might sound rather kind of, cynical kind of, approach to it, but I do think that we have to have an awareness of the existence of the dark side and be willing to admit that it does exist, and that if we can see when this is happening, then we can apply, and we know the good that we do can be applied correctly rather than dissipated too widely in elsewhere where it's inappropriate.
Right. Well, that's something that the fluffy do-gooder, positive thought, that whole. We went through a phase here within the woo-woo community, the consciousness community, whatever you want to call it, here a few years back, where everything seemed to be going towards, don't have any negative thoughts, think only good. That whole mentality was really pushed really hard, and I think we've actually are starting to come out of that now, where people are actually taking a broader view of reality and a broader view of our situation, and instead of turning a complete blind eye to the darkness that's out there, people are really starting to say, hey, okay, it is there, and it is something that we definitely have to deal with, along with trying to keep an optimistic and positive outlook on things. I mean, I think the positive outlook and keeping a positive sense about you is extremely important. But it also, you don't want to have your blinders on so tightly that you don't see that train coming for you when you're walking across the tracks.
Absolutely, yes.
And it's like nobody. It seems like before, nobody wants to do any shadow work. Nobody wants to work on these darker sides. And I don't blame you. I don't want to spend my time immersed in those thought patterns, but at the same time, if I want to grow, I have to understand both sides of the spectrum. We just can't be all positive and love and light and don't think bad about this and that and the other, but at the same time, we have to educate ourselves, and we have to know what's going on. I'm not a fan of watching mainstream media and watching the news, but a couple times a week I turn it on to see what propaganda is pushing out. Because I have to know, because how am I going to, triumph that propaganda if I don't even know it exists?
Absolutely, yes. And I'm just winding back a few seconds. what was said there. For those who might be considering having a look at the book, there's a major kind of bit of shadow work that takes place in there somewhere about a third or so of the way in, halfway through, where I face my own, somebody triggers it in me. So there's a bit of shadow stuff going on elsewhere that I stumble into, but then it activates my own shadow thing that I then have to kind of go through and face, this, dreadful sense of victimization that, I sense. And then finding my way out through a rather tortuous path to a point where I can rise above it and feel that I've gained a sense of empowerment by being able to look back at it with a kind of humor.
Yeah.
And so I think when we go through challenges and when we uncover something of ourselves, because it might not have been a part of me that was wanting to hurt somebody else, but it was a part that was limiting me, and it was limiting my ability to function. We need to be able to get beyond those kind of limitations, which are as much a part of the shadow as cruelty or whatever.
Yeah, that's one you mentioned that victim aspect. That's something that took me quite a bit to to actually work out for myself, as far as taking responsibility for my own life and getting rid of that victimhood or the victim in any situation. And ultimately and eventually I finally came to the point where I was able I'm able to accept everything that happens in my life as my own decisions and my own choices, and because ultimately I made the decision to be exactly where I'm at right now. And all the others, any situation or event that comes across my path, I wouldn't have those things happening in my life if I hadn't made the choice to be there in the first place. So it's sometimes you have to split hairs, and the rationality kind of goes out the windows when you're trying to understand your own role in events that happen to you or with you or for you. It doesn't necessarily make a whole lot of logical sense, your own responsibility for events, but it is definitely there. And your own culpability, or however we want to term that, is definitely a part that we all have to come to eventually within ourselves, that we are the source of all of our pleasures and sorrows.
Yeah, I want to share this thing I wrote just a couple of days ago. It's just a paragraph long, but it gets into that that victim mentality that some of us have, or that. I'm just going to read it real quick, and it says, "It seems like everyone is looking for the enemy, some group or someone to blame for all the chaos and corruption. And yes, there's plenty of blame to go around. But if we are looking for the enemy, we need not look any further than oneself. It is us, the 99%, that is the enemy. We stand by and watch corporate greed and political corruption destroy human life and the environment. Billions of us do nothing while a handful of psychotic so-called elite ravage the earth. Combating the enemy starts with us making better decisions, not spending our time and money into a system that is obviously effed. Not being controlled to believe what the media propaganda is putting out. We are the enemy, but also we are the heroes. Which one are you going to choose?" So, and I wrote that because like we're saying, there's this victim mentality, and there's also this blaming game that we all go through, and there's always somebody to blame. There's always, something that seems to be outside of oneself that dictates what they're going to do and what kind of person they're going to be. But at the end, it's us who make these decisions. It's us who put our intention, who put our energy and put our money into these groups that are causing this stuff to happen throughout the world. So I think it all starts with on a personal level, and it seems to me to be so simple, just to make better decisions.
Mm-hmm.
Not not to go out and play the blame game and be the victim, but to stand in one's own power and take control of one's own life and make better decisions, because those better decisions that one makes will reflect throughout the world. And if there's this a scenario that Daryl Berry told us, if there's 100 people in a boat and 2 people are paddling off towards some big waterfall, and the other 98 people are just sitting around letting them do it.
Yes.
Who's really at fault? Who's really to blame? We can all make better decisions to stop this chaos, to stop this corruption from happening. So yes, there's plenty of blame to go around, but it all starts with self. If you're constantly spending all of your resources, funding these large corporations that are knowingly doing damage to humanity and to the environment, who's really to blame? Is it the corporation, or is it the billions of people that are funding them?
Well, absolutely. We have to make the future for ourselves, don't we? That's ultimately it. And it starts with finding that sense of agency, which you can, increase when you have dealt with your own shadow issues, or at least started to deal with them, because they can be all sorts of things, but usually it's got a lot of fear in there usually somewhere.
Right.
So finding courage, I think, is the really the center of it, because we hear about a lot about opening the heart chakra, and there's a little bit in the book where I talk about this with somebody, but I think that the empathic, sensitive side of the heart chakra is only, let's not say only, but it's the feminine side of the heart chakra. The masculine side of the heart chakra is courage, because the word courage comes from the French word cœur, meaning the heart. So, and that I think is what, in Narnia, Aslan the lion represents. So that's the kind of sense of agency and purpose that I hope people will find if they follow this kind of rite of passage that I went through at the 100th Monkey Camp all those years ago.
Yeah. So what's the primary thing, or what do you hope to accomplish by writing this book? What is your ultimate dream with this?
Well, I would like it to, first of all, to help people find a sense that they can get through difficulties. When I think about the kind of mind-crushing sense of rejection I felt at a particular point. I know this is a common thing, and I see people, I've seen people in, when I've worked in psychiatry, people not being able to just kind of find a way, really. And I think find just the slightest sense of leverage and agency that you can get in your life, because by obviously we see, heartwarming, courageous examples of people who overcome obstacles, on the telly, I'm sure. But what I've attempted to do in my book is go through the psychological process that I went through of facing this, of looking myself in the eye, as it were, and saying, God, I want to change that. And then when, this is what my guide in the book would call power steering. It's like when you've made a firm decision and you try to turn the steering wheel in your life, and then, you know, the metaphysical powers, whatever, they will go, oh, that person's really trying, and then they'll line up some nice synchronicity for you, other. So that's the principal thing. Now there is, as I say, there is a larger kind of backstory that it's kind of a lot to get into. But I think that there were influences. I'll just say it this way: there were influences on the 100th Monkey Camp that were perhaps not what they seemed at first, and this was something I didn't really fully understand in the first camp. I didn't understand it at all in the first camp, so I didn't feel that what I found out later, what I might have found out about the kind of the backstory, about motivations and things like this, I understood them better by the end of the third camp. But a lot of it has only really come more recently, or through my own, later investigations. So it'd be kind of spoiling the game to go into it, just to say,
right,
oh, well, this
right.
is, but I think it's the case. Just as, for instance, we find out that, I was very interested to hear a couple of years ago how, Gordon Wasson and Gregory Bateson were largely influential in setting up the Palo Alto veterans LSD experiments, which
Right.
Ken Kesey and Robert Hunter got involved in, and out of which the Grateful Dead came. But even though the seeding of the California culture in the 60s with psychedelics was, to some extent, I think it was a kind of quasi malicious almost. I think it was something they just wanted to just roll a few dice and see what happened, and I think that it's a testimony to the human spirit that however many times people try and do these things to us, there's always some element who can rise above it and use it almost like you might use a slingshot coming around a planet. You fall into it, but because you come out of it at the right angle, you actually gain momentum and insight. So do you see what I'm saying there?
The proverbial silver lining.
Well, yes, that's
There's
right.
Always a silver lining.
That's right. And it's the more energy you put into it, then, the more it might even turn into gold. I was going to say something about alchemy and stuff, but I don't know if we've really got the kind of the time left for that. But it's kind of about transformation, really.
Yeah, it is definitely. And starting with number one, and that's a key importance. Well, it was a key importance for me for
absolutely. Absolutely.
And realizing that for me to change the world around me, I had to change myself first. So
absolutely, yeah, and that's really what the book is about. So although there are other outside influences, it's almost not the point. It's because the point is whatever you face, coming out of it with that
right
self-honesty and sense of integrity and courage and purpose and agency.
Probably one of the most challenging things people will do in their own lifetimes is to face themselves.
That's right, yeah. But if you think about it,
yeah,
that is what the whole business of coming into incarnation is about.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it may be terrifying, and I can tell you, I wouldn't really like to go through that kind of experience, too frequently. But sometimes it's necessary, and it's like that. To mention C.S. Lewis again, I'm thinking about the occasion in the Voyage of the Dawn Treader when Eustace turns into a dragon because he sleeps in a dragon's hoard.
Right. Right.
And when Aslan turns him back into a boy, he has to it's really painful, but it's a relief at the same time.
Right. Right.
So that's, I guess that's kind of how it works. It's pain, but it's joy, because the process is painful, but that's the transformation, or the
benefits
cleansing
are
out.
well worth it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, Claire, what do you have coming up next? You're working on another book?
Well, I have started working on the sequel. Don't hold your breath waiting for it, because it's going to take me a very long time, and I've got to, I've got to bring together a few resources, and I'm hoping some of the people who were there might be able to assist me with a few little vignettes to stimulate my memory. But I do have the basic outline, and I do have the basic concepts for books 2 and 3 to complete the story, to really go behind what was really going on there. It involves an even deeper descent into hell in book 2 than I did in book 1. However, it all comes to fruition in book 3. And it was a tremendous journey. So I'm working on a few small bits, writing that I might publish as an ebook before that. But this is the magnum opus, and I don't know what I've let myself in for, really. But I will say, actually, that the writing of the book was in itself a tremendous journey of discovery, and I think it helped to fully cement what I had understood at the time. Perhaps it'd be better if I say, if you read a script through and you say, oh yes, I remember that, and then you really study it.
Right.
So reading the script through was what happened to me in the 1990s, and then really working it out in my head and really getting to grips with it and realizing what it was that I had gone through, and really fixing it. And like I was saying earlier about bringing things down through the plane to establish a more fit field. I mean, the astonishing thing is that this camp, the 100th Monkey Camp, there is no, apart from a couple of pages on the organizer's website, there is virtually no record of this out there in the world. That's kind of my contribution to this, is to bring this experience that I had from this into, material reality as much as I can, at least to the point of, the book is written, it's a kind of, what would I say, a stream of consciousness. And there's also a few little vignette cartoons and pictures I did of the camp, which I hope people will find amusing, with the map as well. So that's, so I've really set myself a lifetime task here.
Nice. Well, I look forward to seeing it somewhere down the road, and when you get closer, we'll have to have you on again. This has been a fantastic conversation. I've enjoyed talking to you.
Oh yeah.
Thank you so much for joining us here, and well, keep up the great work. And I've just barely gotten into the book myself, but I am going to continue reading, and great writing style too. I like the
thank you so much.
Yeah, very easy to read. So
thank you very much. Well, thank you guys, and it's been a great pleasure being on your show. Thanks a lot.
Yes, thank you.
All right. Well, guys, we are going to wrap up here. If you are, I don't know, if you are what? I don't know. I started that sentence wrong.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you. Much gratitude. And everybody have a safe and happy holidays, and enjoy themselves this winter. We will talk to you guys next week. Condemnation without investigation is the height of ignorance.
Change the way you look at things, and the things you look at change.
Namaste, my friend.